Why hello there! Are you looking at your Steam page and debating whether or not to play The Witcher 3? But wait, you have yet to play The Witcher 1 or 2. How in the holy hell will you do that? Well, that's easy, just buy them and play them. But wait, did you know that these games are based on a 7-part book series that altogether is about as long as reading the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy? Well, how will you get around to doing that? You're a gamer, you don't like to do that reading thing, and even if you do, you don't want to spend all the time reading, then playing the other games just to get to the game you actually want to play. Well, lucky for you, I just happen to be one of those smelly nerd people that likes to read and play video games. I am a 40-year-old virgin. But in all seriousness, let's get started, shall we? This video will take you through all 7 of the main books, 2 of the comics, we're excluding the 3rd one since it takes place after The Witcher 3, and the first 2 games. So if you really want to jump right into The Witcher 3, you'll have a good idea of what you're in for. This won't go into every last individual detail of the books or the games, but rather give you a quick rundown of the story. Needless to say, I'll tell you the super important shit, and try my best to fit in as many of the elements that the games reference, because although you don't necessarily need to read the books to play the games, they make various references to the books that you wouldn't understand without reading them. The Witcher games can be summarized as being the unofficial sequels to the wildly popular Polish fantasy series entitled The Witcher, written by Andrzej Sapkowski. These books came out a long time before the games, and the games were sequels anyway, so I don't really mind the fact that they incorporated shit from the books, unlike another certain video game that was a game before it was a book and now forces you to read a bunch of very shittily written books and very inconsistent ones at that in order to understand the world and its intricacies. The author has never played any of the games and has the unfortunate outlook that only books can tell stories, which is utterly retarded because I think that the games actually tell better stories than he did. But nevertheless, we're going into the Witcher books today so you can suffer through the first game that has a good story but bad combat, enjoy the hell out of the second game that's pretty short but is still really fun and has a good story, and then fall in love with the third and best fucking game in the whole series and one of the best games ever made. Now, it's important to note that out of the 7 books, only 5 of them are numbered, the others being a collection of short stories that come before the events of the numbered books. If you really want to read them, I definitely recommend them because they're actually really fucking good books, but you have to make sure you're reading them in the order that they're now appearing on screen. Alright, let's do this! The hero of this series is Geralt of Rivia, a witcher, or a professional monster hunter. He's a mutant, bound by magic and elixirs that no ordinary man can withstand, and has unnaturally long life. He was taken by the Witchers at an early age by a thing called the Law of Surprise, which we'll be getting into later. He wanted to call himself Geralt Roger Eric du Haughty Bellegarde. I'm dead serious, the books actually mention that multiple times. But he settled on Geralt of Rivia because his mentor Vesemir told him that same sounded fucking stupid. He's also not actually from Rivia, but he thinks it sounds cool, so... The Witcher begins with The Last Wish, which doesn't have a whole lot of bearing on the series, but it is still a fun thing to read and has important bits and pieces littered about that come up later in the games. There's basically 4 important things about this book, detailing who Geralt is, detailing his reputation as the Butcher of Blaviken, the wedding in Sintra, in detailing his relationship with the sorceress Yennefer, who appears in the 3rd game and throughout all of the books. The first chapter will be familiar to fans of the series. Remember the cutscene that plays at the very beginning of The Witcher 1? Well, that very cutscene is literally one of the chapters in the book, in the beginning of Geralt's story. We're introduced to Geralt as he's having sex in a hospital because he has his neck ripped in half. He's at the temple of the goddess Melitele, and his overseer is a woman named Nanek. Nobody likes him but her and the bitch that Geralt's fucking in the beginning. Basically, Geralt is there because he struck a deal with King Foltest of Temeria to cure his daughter of a curse that turns her into a Striga, which is basically a giant ugly werewolf vampire thing. He lifts the curse, but he gets his neck ripped open in the process because Strigas are fucking cunts. And that is how he ends up in the hospital. The rest of the book is told through flashbacks. We're introduced to Geralt's good old pal Dandelion, a poet who's really good with the ladies, at least until he ends up cheating on literally all of them. He's not a one-woman kind of guy, and despite appearances, I can assure you he's not gay. He just looks a lot like it. Weirdly enough, he's actually probably the most heterosexual character in the whole series. It's very important to know something about Dandelion. Imagine the dumbest person you have ever seen in your entire life and multiply it by 10 billion, and that is Dandelion. He's funny, he's witty, he's a good poet and a ladies' man, but a moron beyond comprehension, and that's why I love him. Geralt then goes to a town called Blaviken, where a wizard he knows is hiding in a tower because people in the town want to kill him. Geralt almost leaves, but is convinced that the leader of the bandits trying to kill the wizard that they'll slaughter the whole town if Geralt doesn't hand over the wizard. Geralt then proceeds to cut them all into tiny pieces, and the town throws him out in disgust and fear, granting him the name the Butcher of Blaviken. Next, Geralt is brought to Sintra, a small country where he's to oversee a wedding where Pavetta, the daughter of Queen Calanthe, is to be married to one of the many hosts, one of them being Crocon Crate, who appears in The Witcher 3. None of these suitors end up marrying her, however, for a man strolls in claiming that he is a perfectly good suitor. No one likes this, and unfortunately, matters aren't made better when the man shapeshifts into a monster. Everyone attacks him and Pavetta goes insane. She releases a very powerful magical force that nearly destroys everything. With the help of Geralt, the curse is broken, and it turns out that Pavetta and the new man have been seeing one another for quite a long time. For Geralt's help in the matter of keeping people from being slaughtered, and for freeing the man, his name being Duny, from his curse, he's offered whatever he wants. Geralt says that in 6 years, he'll return to claim what they don't expect to find. Now for a little backstory. This is a thing that Witchers are known to do, and that is the law of surprise. What Geralt means is that in 6 years, he will come to claim the child of Duny and Pavetta, the very same thing that happened to Geralt himself. Pavetta is pregnant already, and Geralt will eventually return to claim their child. Remember this because it's extremely important. Next, Geralt and Dandelion hunt a monster in the south that locals call a devil. In actuality, it's a moderately intelligent beast called a Sylvan whose name is Torque. Torque is wreaking havoc and preventing crops from growing, so Geralt goes to deal with him by playing a game of riddles. Torque doesn't like losing, so he beats the crap out of Geralt and Dandelion and hands them over to a bunch of murderous elves. One of the elves smashes Dandelion's loot and beats them both up for it, but Torque and another elf, Teruviel, who appears briefly in the first Witcher game, come to the rescue. Teruviel gives Dandelion a new loot and then sends them on their way. This story isn't particularly important, but in one of the quests in the Witcher 3 DLC, Blood and Wine, and as a side note, the Witcher 3's DLC is absolutely worth your money and gives you more content than most games do, so definitely buy all of it, Geralt will recommend to another character in that DLC to stop by Torque's house. In the final story, Dandelion and Geralt are fishing. Dandelion, being the raging idiot that he is, finds a djinn, which you can think of as a genie, but a really evil genie. Rather than listen to Geralt when he says to not fuck with the big black evil cloud monster, Dandelion demands 3 wishes. He squeezes off 2 of them before the djinn fucks his shit up, and Geralt is forced to find someone to heal him before he dies. Geralt rushes to a nearby town where he finds the sorceress Yennefer, who agrees to help him. Dandelion is healed, but Yennefer wants to find the djinn and harness its power. This goes immediately awry and results in the section of the town spontaneously exploding. Geralt comes to the realization that the djinn was actually granting him wishes, not Dandelion. His 3rd wish is used on Yennefer. That wish to be that their lives would be forever intertwined. Geralt does this because he sees that she'll die otherwise, and he doesn't want that. The two promptly fuck the shit out of each other, and that's how the book ends. Now we go on to the second and one of the best books in the entire series, Sword of Destiny. If you've ever wanted to laugh a lot in a book, this is easily one of the funniest books I've ever read. The book starts off after Geralt leaves the Temple of Melitele. At this point, Yennefer has gone away, and the two are not very happy with one another. Geralt disappeared for 4 years, and she was kinda pissed off about that. Unfortunately for them, they and Dandelion are brought together in order to find and slay a golden dragon. Geralt doesn't want to do it, but Yennefer does. Sorceresses are infertile, and she believes that the tissue of a dragon will cure her infertility. They're accompanied by a contingent of soldiers, all of whom want to kill the dragon for fame, fortune, and the hand of a princess. The dragon, as it turns out, is a pretty fucking formidable and intelligent beast. It can speak to them all telepathically and wants an honorable one-on-one duel. This goes just as horrible as you'd expect for some faggot knight to go up to a giant-ass dragon for a one-on-one. The soldiers get testy and want Geralt to go kill it. Geralt, however, is best buddies with Ricky Gervais and doesn't want to kill a dragon because it's intelligent. They're also nearly extinct, and it hasn't done anything to anybody. It's part of his moral code not to kill intelligent and non-violent monsters. This pisses the soldiers off, and they proceed to tie Geralt, Dandelion, and Yennefer to a wagon while the soldiers run off to kill it. And the whole time, Dandelion is staring up Yennefer's skirt and won't shut the hell up about how happy it makes him. Eventually, they get free and kill the soldiers, the rest fleeing from the site. The dragon, as it turns out, can shapeshift into a man that Geralt met earlier in the story, but didn't seem too important at the time. He thanks Geralt and leaves peacefully. In the first Witcher game, Dandelion actually points out that Geralt was friends with a dragon and a vampire. We'll get into the vampire part later. Later on, Geralt and Dandelion are strolling through town when something peculiar happens. Someone is stealing people's identities. This someone is has a Doppler named Dudu who can shapeshift and cause mischief, chiefly being running a man's business into the ground. They capture Dudu and fix everything, then send Dudu on his way. This comes into play in The Witcher 3 when he helps Geralt on his quest. Next, we arrive at the forest of Brokilon, home of the Dryads. Most people are killed for even entering, but Geralt is a special exception for being their friend. Someone else, however, has also made it into Brokilon, though unannounced and unwanted. A young girl named Ciri. Remember Duny and Pavetta? Ciri is their daughter, though Geralt is not yet aware of it. Geralt tries to convince Ciri to go home, but Ciri's a sassy little cunt and doesn't want to do that shit. The Dryads, however, want to make Ciri theirs. They have a bit of a fetish for turning little girls into Dryads. Geralt takes Ciri under his protection and leads her home, and thus begins the relationship between the two. There's a few other events. Geralt gets into a fight with some guy trying to win over Yennefer, but they both fail because she can't choose between either of them. Geralt is also almost killed, but saved by a young dwarf. Eventually, the day arrives when Geralt returns to Sintra. At this time, Duny and Pavetta have been mysteriously killed when a freak storm destroys their ship off the Isles of Skellige. Queen Calanthe blames Crocon Crate and his men for not keeping them safe and took Ciri back to the mainland as she'd been staying in Skellige for classes. Calanthe orders Geralt to take the child, but at this point, he doesn't know that Ciri is the daughter, and Calanthe won't tell him that. Eventually, during their conversation, Geralt realizes who it is, but chooses not to take her and leaves Sintra. Not long after, a new enemy arrives in the world, Nilfgaard, a foreign nation from the mountains, and they invade and destroy Sintra. Dandelion is the one to break the news to him, and Geralt, with a heavy heart, accepts that Ciri has been killed. Remember the dwarf that saved Geralt? They travel to the dwarf's home to give him supplies and a bed to lay in for helping the dwarf in his hour of need, and we're introduced to Ciri, who has been rescued and brought there. You may recall this being a cutscene if you've played The Witcher 3. Geralt realizes in that moment that Ciri is bound to him, and she is his destiny. Ciri becomes largely the focus of the story, with Geralt being the driving force behind the events that happen. Remember when Pavetta let out that burst of magic? That's because she's the long descendant of powerful magic users, and she has the Elder Blood, which makes her incredibly powerful. Ciri also has it and makes her just as powerful, if not more, and essential to the war that's about to happen. The rest of the world realizes that Nilfgaard is an even bigger threat than they feared. The Emperor of Nilfgaard, Emir von Emrys, wants to take Ciri as his bride in order to gain peaceful rule over Sintra. Ciri and Geralt, however, head to the Witcher castle of Kaer Morhen, where he intends to teach her how to be a Witcher. Ciri is plagued by nightmares of a Nilfgaardian soldier with wings on his helmet that did something to her. She doesn't remember what happened, but it scarred her deeply. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. 4 books from now. However, Dandelion starts running his mouth to the wrong people, knowing that Geralt and Ciri still live, and an assassin, Reince, attempts to torture him. Yennefer arrives to save the day and burns Reince's face away, and Dandelion tries to convince her to go help Geralt. She refuses for her own personal reasons, but knows someone who can help him. Geralt introduces Ciri to the rest of the Witchers, his mentor Vesemir and his pals Lambert and Eskel, as well as another Witcher, Cohen. They begin to teach her how to be a Witcher despite females traditionally not being in their order. We're introduced to another sorceress, Triss Merigold, Yennefer's best friend. Triss really desperately wants Geralt to fuck her for some reason. I don't know. Anyway, as it turns out, 5 dudes in a ruined castle in the middle of nowhere just so happen to not know a single thing about raising a little girl, and Triss whips them into shape and starts to act like an elder sister to Ciri and care for her. Eventually, Geralt, Triss, and Ciri leave, and Geralt intends to take Ciri to the Temple of Melitele where she can harness her magical abilities, because for some reason she can't master simple signs like the Witchers can despite having the Elder Blood. Along the way, Triss falls deathly ill, and they join a band of dwarves and soldiers shipping supplies for King Hensel. Geralt reluctantly agrees to act as an escort because the Scoia'tael are in the area. The Scoia'tael, or squirrels in Elvish, are elvish terrorists that want to kill humans for taking their land and committing mass genocide against their people. Geralt doesn't want to get involved and tries to explain to Ciri why Witchers need to be neutral in wars. He shows her the ruins of an elvish city, and just then the elves attack the caravan, kill a ton of people, and almost kill Triss. Geralt drops off Ciri at the temple, and Yennefer arrives to train her. They kind of hate each other at first, but eventually a mother-daughter relationship springs between the two. All the while, Geralt hunts for Reince, trying to find out why Emir is making such an effort to capture Ciri. Dandelion introduces Geralt to his friend Shani, who is in the first game in the Hearts of Stone DLC in The Witcher 3. They introduce each other by fucking the shit out of each other, which Dandelion walks in on and is promptly crushed by the sight.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Geralt is then introduced to Philippa Eilhart, another sorceress who wants to find Ciri and use her for political gain in the magical world, and she's helped by a spy named Dijkstra who appears in The Witcher 3. The two collude to help Geralt and find Rience, but only for their own benefit. Geralt almost captures Rience outside of Oxenfurt, but Philippa stops him. Geralt suffers various wounds from his fight with Rience, but Philippa is revealed to be working against him in order to find Ciri herself. She then leaves Geralt behind. Now we get to Time of Contempt. This is the worst book in the whole series. It's one of those books where almost nothing happens, but there's a huge world-changing event that happens that makes it important in the long run, but still, this book is not very good. Geralt is tracking Rience. Yennefer fears for her safety as well as Ciri's, so they go to a school where Ciri can be protected and hone her magical abilities. Unfortunately, this is inadvertently playing right into what Philippa Eilhart wants. Ciri doesn't want anything to do with any of them and runs off to find Geralt. Geralt, however, is trying to understand what the Nilfgaardians went with Ciri and goes to two spies, Codringer and Fen. The two agree to get information for him, and Geralt and Dandelion set off to the Isle of Thanedd, where Ciri and Yennefer have gone. Luckily, the two arrive just in time to find Ciri being chased by phantoms known as the Wild Hunt. They don't play a huge role in the books and only really show up in the third game, but basically the Wild Hunt are dark elves that haunt the skies, and they have a particular interest in harnessing the power of the Elder Blood, hence why they desperately want Ciri. Geralt fends them off, and Yennefer arrives to help. The two make up, and then they go back to the school with Ciri in tow. At this point, a congregation is occurring with the sorcerers and sorceresses. A coup happens, one orchestrated by several mages, the Scoia'tael and Nilfgaard. Many sorcerers are killed, and Geralt is gravely wounded. Yennefer goes missing and is accused of staging the coup with Geralt as an accomplice. Ciri makes it out of the place but is chased by Nilfgaardians, one of which is the one that's haunted her dreams. She escapes into a portal in the unstable Tower of Tor Lara, where many people have gone but never came back out, flopping in a desert far, far away. Dijkstra tries to stop Geralt from leaving the castle, but then Geralt promptly breaks his leg so that he can go find Ciri. This is a point that does come up in The Witcher 3. Geralt tracks her down and almost kills the Nilfgaardian that scares her, but he spares him. He gets into a fight with a sorcerer, the one who staged the coup, named Vilgefortz. He's working with Emir and also wants Ciri's power. He wounds Geralt and tries to get him into the tower to capture Ciri, but she enters the portal and the tower explodes and destroys half of his face. He escapes, and Triss later finds Geralt and teleports him to Brokilon to heal. Ciri lands in the desert where a unicorn saves her. She manages to escape with her life, but falls into the hands of a bunch of criminals called the Rats. She joins their band and is almost raped by a human male. An elf female won't let that shit happen though and sends him away. Ciri thanks her, and the elf chick proceeds to lesbian rape Ciri instead. For some reason, this leads to a very awkward and very forced romance between the two. I guess it wasn't technically rape since she didn't protest or anything, but the whole scene had a very extremely uncomfortable rapey vibe to it. Now we get to the best book in the whole series. Why is this the best book? Because it almost exclusively follows Geralt. It's no surprise that the main character is the most fun. Ciri is a great character and all, and her story deals with more magic in the lore of the Witcher universe. That's great and all, but Geralt's story is pretty much non-stop action, and I like that a lot more. The book follows him almost the entire time. Ciri, as it turns out, only shows up in this book in a very brief dream sequence. Geralt is in Brokilon healing when a woman named Milva arrives. She informs him of how the war with Nilfgaard is going. It's going pretty shit, by the way. Nilfgaard is kicking everyone's asses. Geralt sees visions of Ciri and is convinced she's being held in Nilfgaard, and his suspicions are doubled when word gets out that she is there. Only she isn't. Emir has been given a replacement to keep stability in the region. Emir talks with the man that's been haunting Ciri's nightmares for years and implies that he has met Geralt before and knows he won't rest until he finds Ciri first. Meanwhile, Rience moves in. Codringer and Fen have discovered what the Nilfgaardians want and uncover a dark secret about Emir and his relationship with Duny and Pavetta. Rience kills them, destroying all of the evidence. Once Geralt is ready, he, Dandelion, and Milva run out to find Ciri. Almost immediately, they find our Nilfgaardian friend tied up, and Geralt nearly kills him again, but doesn't. They continue on and meet a band of dwarves leading refugees to safety, their leader, Zoltan Chive, being another of Geralt's good friends that shows up throughout all of the Witcher games. They travel together and soon meet the Nilfgaardian again. Geralt threatens to kill him, but the Nilfgaardian, whose name is Cahir, wants to help Ciri for the guilt of what he did to her. Geralt begrudgingly lets him come along, and soon enough they meet an eccentric man named Regis, who also comes along. Eventually they come across men hunting for a vampire, and they promptly beat the shit out of them. They arrive at a village where a witch trial is happening. Regis demonstrates that she is no witch by a baptism of fire, where he grabs a burning horseshoe from a fire and it has no effect on him whatsoever. Nilfgaardians attack before the witch burning can finish, and Dandelion is shot through the ear. Regis stitches him back up, but Geralt is onto him. Only one other creature like him can come away unscathed from sticking his hand into a fire. Regis, as it turns out, is a higher vampire. There are various types of vampires, most of them being horrible, monstrous beasts. Higher vampires like Regis appear perfectly human unless they go into a rage, but Regis has sworn off human blood and is well-mannered. Geralt, however, doesn't trust him and sends him away. Almost immediately, Geralt and Dandelion are captured and Regis frees them. Geralt, despite himself, lets Regis back into the group. They find Cahir, Milva, and Zoltan and continue on their way. Meanwhile, the sorceresses are gathering. With so many sorcerers dead, Philippa Eilhart and many others wish to make their femininity supreme, believing themselves to be superior to men and thus create the Lodge of Sorceresses. Yennefer, who was turned into a tiny statue by Philippa, doesn't seem to like the idea of the Lodge, and with the help of her friends like Keira Mintz, who Geralt briefly met in the last book and who appears in The Witcher 3, Yennefer escapes to find Geralt and Ciri, who are more important to her than this strange lodge. Philippa and Dijkstra plot and plan to find Ciri, who is still traveling with the rats. Milva discovers she's pregnant from an elf that she loved but was killed. She doesn't want to do it, but knows that the pregnancy could harm the mission. Regis gives her a pill if she wants to abort it. Ultimately, she decides against it. They hijack a boat and travel down the Yaruga River to reach Nilfgaard faster, but instead come into a huge battle between the forces of Rivia and Nilfgaard. Not wishing to stand by and do nothing, Geralt and Cahir rush into the fray and rally the Rivians while the rest of the group can get to safety. As it turns out, Milva didn't need the pill because during the battle she's wounded and miscarries anyway. They win the battle and the queen officially knights Geralt, granting him the official title, much to his amusement, Geralt of Rivia. Now we get to the Tower of Swallows, the second worst book in this series, for much the same reason that Time of Contempt wasn't too good. It barely follows Geralt and not much happens. The story begins with Ciri stumbling into the house of an old man close to death and with a huge horse that she named Kelpie after a giant sea monster. The man nurses her back to health, but she has gaps in her memory and seems to have passed several weeks ahead of time. She explains that a man commissioned to kill the rats, Leo Bonhart, slaughtered all of her friends and couldn't quite kill her. He took her as a slave, throwing her into fighting pits like an animal. She managed to escape and steal a horse, but she was gravely wounded as she fled. Geralt, however, is traveling with his team. He meets an elf named Avalok who tells him the destiny of Ciri and how she's part of a prophecy where only she, a child of the Elder Blood, can stop the apocalypse called the White Frost, where the world will be encased in ice and all life will die. He wants to use Ciri for his own benefit, but Geralt tells him to fuck off and draw dicks on the wall. That part isn't a joke, by the way. Avalok was drawing pictures and Geralt literally tells him to, quote, draw giant erect phalluses on them, and for a second, Avalok makes it seem like he actually might do it. Geralt then encounters a girl that looks like Ciri, but isn't. The book makes it seem like that's important, but it really isn't all that important at all. And they fight their way to an elf assassin who knows about Rhys and what Emperor Emhyr wants with Ciri. This storyline doesn't have much of a resolution to it, only that the group is largely separated as they try to find the mages that can help Geralt find Ciri's exact location. Geralt and Cahir flee from the Nilfgaardians together, and Cahir reveals what he did to Ciri. It's implied throughout the books that he raped her, but it's actually not quite the case. He grabbed Ciri from the burning capital of Sintra and took pity on her. She was shell-shocked and incoherent, and he took her to a river where he undressed her, cleaned her up, and put her clothes back on. She eventually escaped him, but parts of her memory simply weren't there due to the trauma she experienced from the destruction of Sintra. As it turns out, Cahir had intended to keep her safe from Emhyr once he saw her because he felt sorry for the girl. Together, he and Geralt travel south where they regroup with the others, and Regis reveals that their destination is within reach, and soon they'll find Ciri. Now we get to the best part of the whole book. Yennefer escapes the Lodge of Sorceresses and goes to the Isles of Skellige, where she intends to find out why Emhyr wants Ciri so badly. She starts to slowly uncover the mysterious deaths of Duny and Pavetta, and Crocon Crate sends her and 2 ships out to the same place where they died. Had it not been for Yennefer's insistence that Croc's sons stay on another boat, he would have died too. As soon as they get to the area, a storm arrives from thin air and destroys the ship, sucking away everyone into the ocean. Croc's son returns to his father and reports that Yennefer and all hands on that ship have died. This, however, is not the case. Yennefer was the sole survivor, and she isn't underwater. The storm was a teleporter of sorts, and Yennefer is tortured by Rhys and Vilgefortz trying to pry the information on where Ciri is out of her head. However, Yennefer has no idea where Ciri is either, so they go for the next best thing: Geralt. The story ends with Ciri leaving the old man's house and making her way to the Tower of Swallows, a place that is said to lead Ciri to different worlds. Leo Bonhart, joined with Rhys and his men, are almost on her, but she kills many of them and escapes into the Tower of Swallows, out of reach. Rhys fires a spell at her, but it rebounds when she deflects it and cracks the ice beneath him. Thus, Rhys drowns. Bonhart has lost on this fine day. When she enters the portal, she falls into a new world, and an elf named Avallac'h is there waiting for her. Now we finally come to the 7th and final book in the series, The Lady of the Lake. The book starts off with two women from the future who are trying to discover the story of Ciri and Geralt. This may not seem important, but they do play a part later in the book. Here's the stakes, people. Geralt is in Toussaint, a territory of Nilfgaard, but technically independent of the Empire. Geralt finds the druids who are meant to help him find Ciri, but they're unable to locate her due to the fact that she's in a different world. Yennefer is captured by Vilgefortz, who is slowly regenerating his face and being evil like usual. Ciri is now trapped in an elf world with no way out. The North is losing the war against Nilfgaard. Stakes seem high enough? Alright, let's continue. Geralt and the team stay in Toussaint where they meet Fringilla Vigo. Unbeknownst to them, she's a plant by the Lodge of Sorceresses to keep Geralt from getting out to find Ciri first. She gives Geralt a necklace to replace his Witcher medallion, which he lost in the last book. Dandelion goes off frolicking like a faggot with the Duchess of Toussaint. The two had met before, where Dandelion, being the good old lovable idiot that he is, managed to seduce her. When he left Toussaint, her husband came back and discovered that the Duchess was having an affair, and he literally died of anger. Now, Dandelion is madly in love with her and is vying to be the Duke of Toussaint. Geralt, on one of his monster contracts, sees a vision of Ciri and realizes that he needs to get into Nilfgaard to help her. The team leaves despite it being winter and the mountains getting incredibly treacherous. Meanwhile, Ciri is being held by Avallac'h, where he explains her lineage. She is the descendant of an incredibly powerful elf. Avallac'h has built up animosity toward her though, because Lara Dorren, the elf he wanted to marry, chose to be with a human. Several timelines later, Ciri is born. To pay the debt he feels he's owed, Avallac'h wants Ciri to birth the child of the king of their land. Without any other way out, Ciri reluctantly agrees. The king, however, has no desire to do so and refuses to fuck her. This results in some really weird, awkward, unfinished foreplay scenes. Ciri eventually meets another elf named Eredin. Eredin, unbeknownst to her and many others, is the king of the Wild Hunt. He has a vested interest in getting the king killed and tries to trick Ciri into killing him with the false promise of freeing her from that world. Ciri refuses, but Eredin still kills the king anyway, making him overdose on drugs. Ciri refuses, but Eredin still kills the king anyway so he can get what he wants. Ciri is saved by the unicorn she met in the desert, and they begin to travel through different worlds while Eredin and the Wild Hunt pursue her. The Wild Hunt wants her powers and will stop at nothing to get them. Ciri goes to many different worlds, one of which is our own world, where she meets none other than Sir Galahad. She goes from world to world, struggling to find her home. Eventually, the Wild Hunt catch up to her, and Ciri travels through hundreds of different worlds. She tries to teleport directly to Geralt and ends up in a snowstorm. Saddened to realize that she couldn't even manage to find her symbolic father, she leaves. Moments later, Geralt and the team arrive. Geralt can feel the draw from her and makes the group press on further. Eventually, she travels to the future where she meets the two women from the beginning of the story. They open a portal for her to get back to her time and place, and she gratefully goes through. She ends up at Vilgefortz's castle where Yennefer is being held. She goes in and is captured by him and Leo Bonhart. During this time, we go to the Battle of Brenna, a turning point in the Witcher storyline. Up until now, the war against Nilfgaard has gone horribly. Cintra is under Nilfgaardian occupation and the armies are falling. A joint force made up of Temeria, Redania, and several other massive armies fight off the Nilfgaardians. They win the battle, turning the tide of the war, which results in the North winning over the Nilfgaard and pushing them back whence they came. This is not without many casualties, however, one of which is Ciri's old friend Cohen, the Witcher she met at Kaer Morhen. Ciri is informed by Vilgefortz that he too wants her power and is working against Emir's wishes. He will surgically impregnate her, tear out the fetus, and use it to gain the power that she has. Just in the nick of time, Geralt and the team assaults the castle. Regis turns into a bat and starts slaughtering the guards and frees Ciri. She runs off to find Yennefer. In the bottom of the castle, the others fight off the guards. Milva takes out several of the archers, but in one final moment, she's shot. The wound is fatal, and she dies. The girl that Geralt found in the last book, Angelim, is distraught but ready for vengeance. She and Cahir rush into the fortress to kill as many of the guards as possible, but Geralt and Regis try and find Yennefer and Ciri. Geralt finds Yennefer and frees her, but the two are confronted by Vilgefortz, resulting in a climactic battle in his tower. Ciri runs into Cahir and Angelim, and they all three run into Bonhart. Angelim is wounded from the fight downstairs, so she and Ciri run off to find Geralt, leaving Cahir to deal with Bonhart. Bonhart shows off the Witcher necklaces he's stolen from men he's slain, but that doesn't deter Cahir. The two fight, and Cahir fights admirably, but he too is killed. Ciri tries to reach Geralt, but Angelim doesn't make it, dying of her wounds. Ciri is now forced to fight Bonhart alone. The two fight along the rafters of the tower, and she uses her skills taught to her at Kaer Morhen to kill him. He falls to the bottom of the tower. She follows him, takes back the Witcher necklaces, and finishes him off once and for all. Meanwhile, Geralt and Yennefer are fighting Vilgefortz. Regis comes in to save them, but Vilgefortz melts the vampire into slag, supposedly killing him. In reality, Regis doesn't die. Vampires can only be killed by other higher vampires. Regis has regenerated before, but it took him decades to do so. For all intents and purposes, he's dead for now, but he does return in the Witcher 3 Blood and Wine DLC. Geralt and Yennefer are almost killed, but at the last moment, Geralt uses the necklace that Fringilla gave him to create an illusion that tricks Vilgefortz. The trick is fatal, and Geralt kills him. They find Ciri and fight their way to the bottom of the castle. Unfortunately, they're met by Nilfgaardian forces, accompanied by Emir's hired mercenaries, the Salamandra. Emir is there with them. Geralt recognizes him, and the two talk privately. Emir reveals his side of the story. He was the outcast of a former emperor of Nilfgaard. A mage put a curse on him that turns him into an urchin in the daylight, a curse that Geralt cured in the first book. He used the name Duny as a cover-up and grew out his hair and beard to disguise himself. When his father died, Emir reclaimed the throne of Nilfgaard and stole away in a ship outbound for Skellige with his wife Pavetta in tow. Emir wanted to take Ciri back with him to Nilfgaard and pull a Targaryen on her because there's truly nothing better than a daddy-daughter porn... But Pavetta caught wind of what was happening and knew Emir was just using her for the Elder Blood, so she made Ciri stay with Crocon Crate. Emir found out too late and got pissy, so he threw Pavetta overboard as the ship went through the portal. Emir then sent Cahir to go get Ciri when Nilfgaard laid siege to Sintra, so obviously that changed when Cahir took pity on her. Emir wants to kill Geralt and Yennefer so Ciri, and the rest of the world for that matter, never know that he is her father. Yennefer doesn't know, however, and Geralt tries to convince Emir to let her go free, but Emir knows they'll still have to come back and get Ciri no matter what it takes, and he promises that he'll take care of Ciri and leave the rest of Geralt's friends alone, but Geralt and Yennefer have to kill themselves. Strangely enough, they do agree to this, but then again he didn't really have much of a choice in the matter. He and Yennefer say their goodbyes to Ciri and she tearfully watches them go. Emir is moved by her emotions, and rather than taking her to Nilfgaard, he lets her go, calls back his men, and Geralt, Yen, and Ciri are free to go wherever they choose. Ciri pays her respects to the people that helped her throughout her journey. Yennefer is called to the Lodge of Sorceresses in order to discuss what they should do with Ciri. Geralt, however, takes Ciri to Toussaint. They don't stay there too long, however, because an execution is happening and our good old friend Dandelion is being executed. What could our lovable idiot have done this time? Well, despite having literally everything going for him, Dandelion decided to fuck some other bitch behind the Duchess's back. At the last moment, she calls off the execution, but forbids him from ever returning to Toussaint. Geralt and Ciri bring him back with them, where they tell Dandelion quite promptly that he's a gigantic fucking moron. Ciri then leaves with Yennefer to go talk with the sorceresses and agrees to meet Geralt and Dandelion in Rivia so they can relax. Ciri is told that she will be the wife of a prince and she will bear his child. Basically, they just want to do the same thing that every single bad guy in this series has wanted to do with her anyway. Ciri reluctantly agrees, and she, Yennefer, and Triss go off to Rivia to see Geralt. Geralt is already there, and he and Dandelion have met up with Zoltan Chive. They have drinks and eat a lot, but a commotion is going on outside. Rivia is the hotspot of racial tensions between the humans, elves, and dwarves. A massacre begins, and the humans kill anyone that they deem to be undesirable. Geralt sends his friends inside to safety, but goes out and tries to save as many people as he can and quell the battle. However, in the fray, a man stabs him with a pitchfork, and he begins to die. Yennefer and Triss call upon a magical lightning storm that halts the battle. Yennefer is wounded and spends even more energy trying to save Geralt, but nothing can be done. Then, the unicorn that helps Ciri appears from the lake with a boat in tow. Ciri helps Yennefer and Geralt into the boat, and she and the unicorn lead them into another plane of existence, into a kind of purgatory where they can heal. In the physical realm, they're both dead. Geralt from his wounds, and Yennefer from spending all her energy trying to save him. Ciri leaves them there so they can eventually return to the mortal realm. Thus ends the last Witcher book. But there's a lot of shit that happens between the book and the first game. 5 years pass, in fact. It's important to remember that the games are unofficial sequels to the books. Everything that happens from this point on is game material. The games, however, don't do a really good job of trying to explain it all, so I'll do it a lot better for you here. Remember our good old friend Aridin? Well, he and the Wild Hunt were still chasing Ciri, and they found Geralt and Yennefer trying to heal. They kidnapped Yennefer, and Geralt was forced to try and find her again. He was helped by several other Witchers, including the main antagonist of The Witcher 2, Letho of Gullet. Together, they find the Wild Hunt, and Geralt exchanges his life for Yennefer's. Letho keeps watch over Yen, while Geralt serves his sentence, riding with the Wild Hunt as a specter. Eventually, Geralt escapes them, but is heavily wounded. Ciri, who had been traveling between worlds still, trying to escape the Wild Hunt, saves Geralt and teleports him to Kaer Morhen. The wounds he sustains makes him completely lose his memory. He faintly recalls things like his name, a few of the people he knew, and how to fight monsters, naturally, but nothing else. Thus begins the first Witcher game. Now I'm going to give you a rundown of the first 2 games if you really just want to jump right into The Witcher 3. Now, the first Witcher game fucking sucks, let's be honest. The gameplay is a nightmare. It doesn't know if it wants to be turn-based or a hands-on action game, and decided to be both. Naturally, those two things don't mesh together too well. But the story is so good that it was worth playing once and then probably never again. The Witcher 2, on the other hand, is really fucking good. It's pretty short and the music is kinda but the combat is fun and the story is good, so I would definitely recommend playing it. Still, if you want to jump right into the third game, here's a summary of the first 2. Geralt wakes up in a forest near Kaer Morhen. Lambert and Eskel find him there and bring him back to the castle, where Triss revives him. Geralt has lost his memory and barely remembers any of them. All of the members of Regis, Cahir, Milva, Angelim, Yennefer, and even Ciri are gone. The castle is then attacked by the Salamandra, Emir's old mercenary group gone rogue. They invade Kaer Morhen and kill another Witcher student, Leo, and escape with the secrets to the Witcher mutagens that allow them so much magical power and strength. Geralt goes on a quest to find them, avenge Leo, and prevent the Salamandra from using the Witcher mutagens. Along the way, he meets up with Shani, who he also doesn't remember. She's in the outskirts of Old Vizima, which is being plagued by specters. There, he meets a kid named Elvin, who is being possessed and recites Ithleen's prophecy. You know, the thing that Ciri is supposed to be the answer to, with the White Frost and all that shit. Well, Elvin is a huge focal point in this game because the Wild Hunt keeps fucking with him. Geralt tracks down the professor who traveled with the Salamandra to a tower in the swamps, but he escapes because Geralt's kind of a pussy. Geralt discovers a plot going on in Vizima where there's a bunch of people using each other and manipulating one another to throw off the Salamandra's trail. Geralt sees through the bullshit and is then invited to a birthday party or something. He meets his old friend Dandelion, who tells him things about his past, like that he was friends with a dragon and a vampire. Everyone conveniently forgets to mention to Geralt that he has a wife and quote-unquote daughter, so he fucks Triss and hands Elvin over to her because why not? She knows magic, that ought to do. At the party is the daughter of King Foltest, you know, the bitch that turned into a monster that almost killed Geralt in the first book. Well, apparently she's having monster problems again and gets her panties in a bunch when Geralt is trying to save the world and she tries to kill him. But he teleports away and then he finds Elvin fumbling around in the middle of nowhere, and then elves attack a village and Elvin teleports away because apparently he has a problem with that, but not before Geralt can give him a medallion to remember him by. Elvin accidentally teleports into the super future where the White Frost fucks up the planet, then travels back into the past and gets stuck there forever. So anyway, Geralt fucks Triss again because why not, and finds the Salamandra and kills them all. Then riots happen in Vizima and Geralt finds a soldier there who tells him about the White Frost, and then you kill him because he's so much of an asshole. And he has the medallion that Geralt gave Elvin, so in actuality, Geralt killed Elvin because he got stuck in the past, and he listened to way too much right-wing talk radio, which came to him in the form of the Wild Hunt. And then Aridin tells Geralt that he sucks at everything, and then transports him back into his normal world because he beat the game, so he deserves it. Then Foltest gives Geralt money because why not get a little bit of money? It's not as though the game just forgot to add New Game Plus, so that money is worthless anyway. But then someone tries to assassinate Foltest, and Geralt kills him and discovers that the assassin was a Witcher. But Foltest, despite seeing this directly, manages to never put 2 and 2 together and is oblivious as shit to the idea that he almost got murdered by another Witcher. And then the game ends. There you go, now you don't have to play through a really shitty 30-hour game that no one really liked. Now it's time to get to the game that people did like. Now, The Witcher 2 is pretty choice-heavy, and your campaign can go 2 totally different ways depending on the characters you choose to side with. But since one of the 2 storylines isn't actually included in The Witcher 3, we'll ignore it and go with the storyline that The Witcher 3, I guess, assumes you took anyway. So The Witcher 2 begins with showing your old buddy Letho, that you don't remember, killing kings because that's always fun. Then it immediately transitions to you ass-fucking Triss because, fuck, look at that sexy bitch. So the both of you are working for King Foltest because why not? And you attack Lavalette Castle to rescue Foltest's bastard children and his slut wife. You take the castle, but Letho kills Foltest, which sends Temeria spiraling into destruction. You are then labeled as the Kingslayer because you were the only other one in the room and Letho jumped out a window and escaped with some Scoia'tael. So you're in jail, but the broest bro of all the bros, Vernon Roach, comes to help you and sets you free, and you escape the Temerians and go off to hunt the Kingslayer. Triss decides that after all this time of Geralt and her fucking each other that she should probably tell you that he actually has a wife. Might have been something worth mentioning. So you go to Flotsam where there's a giant octopus killing things so you can't leave. You help a sorceress, Sheila de Tankerville, kill the octopus, and you meet an elf called Yorveth. He's kind of like the elf equivalent of a Black Lives Matter protester and pretty much completely unlikable. But he's buddy-buddy with Saskia, who's cool, and we won't deal with her because she's part of the storyline that we won't be actually giving a shit about. But it's important to note that Saskia turns into a dragon sometimes because the Lodge of Sorceresses were all like, LOL, let's make you turn into a dragon, rawr. So you almost kill Letho and then you don't, and then you fuck Triss again in an ancient elvish bathtub sitting in the woods in the middle of nowhere, and then you find Zoltan and Dandelion about to be hung because if there's anything these guys are good at, it's almost dying. So you save them, get on your boat, and chase everyone to the Kidweni battlefield where King Henselt is trying to kill people because he's being haunted by the ghost of a sorceress that he killed for being too much of an asshole. So you help him lift the curse so he can kill people again, and then Letho almost kills him with the other two Witchers. But you kill two of the Witchers, and then Letho grabs Triss and escapes with a Nilfgaardian ship. Oh yeah, Amir got bored of not killing things anymore, so he decided to go back to doing that again. So Geralt tries to gather his friends, but returns to the Kidweni camp to find that Henselt decided to be a douche nozzle and kill all of Roach's men. How dare you fuck with the best sidekick in the game? Oh, and he raped Roach's second-in-command, which Geralt says that she's lying about, but it literally never comes up again, so I think either developers didn't give enough of a shit to tell you, or they genuinely forgot that they even wrote that into the game in the first place. So you travel to Loch Moine, where the kingdoms are trying to vie for power again, and where the children of Foltest who saw Foltest's murder and know that Geralt is innocent are being held. Geralt tries to save the kids in Triss and decides that the kids are more important than the ginger puss. So you save the kids and return to see that Letho has turned himself in and then blames the Lodge of Sorceresses for killing the kings, and then everyone takes him at face value and decides to start a witch hunt against them, including literally gouging out Philippa Eilhart's eyes and then burning other sorceresses at the stake. Then a dragon appears and it's Saskia because, you know, they put a dragon in the game, so we may as well make it a boss fight at the end. So Geralt tracks Sheila to a tower where she's about to die because Letho switched out one of her teleporter crystals out with something else and she's about to spontaneously combust, but you help her out and then she tells her where Yennefer is. And Yennefer also knows where Ciri is, and then Saskia attacks, and after suffering through a bullshit boss fight that's completely rigged as fuck, you defeat Saskia but choose not to kill her because even though you really want to, Geralt doesn't like killing dragons, so for roleplay purposes you don't. Unless you do, in which case it feels so fucking satisfying. Then you go back to Loch Moine and Roach has guaranteed your innocence. You find Letho when he tells you all the shit I explained like 5 minutes ago, and then he says he helped out Triss. You have the choice to kill him or not. You don't kill him because Letho is really cool, and if you keep him alive, he shows up in The Witcher 3 and he's really fun, so why the fuck not? Then Nilfgaard starts invading the north again and starts with completely taking over Temeria since Foltest is dead, and since everyone is basically retarded and useless, it's really just Nilfgaard versus Redania, and as a pro tip, Nilfgaard is the one you should choose to ally with in the third game because Redanians really hate non-humans and half of your friends aren't human anyway, so fuck that shit. Geralt then goes off with Vesemir to find Yennefer, and he receives a letter from her telling him to meet her at a village called White Orchard. Meanwhile, Ciri is still lost and being chased by the Wild Hunt. Now it's time for The Witcher 3. When it comes to the comics, you really don't need to know what happens. They're pretty much pointless, but it's just a few more short stories that really aren't too related, and the comics actually cover a couple of them anyway. The third comic takes place after The Witcher 3. It's still not really important and is really only a side thing, but they're okay comics. The world of The Witcher book is really good and informative if you want to read it and go more in depth than I did in this video, but that's not too important to read either. It just explains a lot more of the details that I didn't go into here. Anyway, that's all you really need to know about the books in the first two games. Apparently The Witcher TV show is going to follow the events of the books, so we'll see how that turns out. If you wanted to get into The Witcher 3 and didn't want to read 7 books and play 50 hours worth of one bad game and one good game, then here you go. I got you through all of it. Now do yourself a favor, buy The Witcher 3 Gold Edition that comes with all the unbelievably amazing expansions and have more content than most full-priced video games do. And enjoy the 140-hour journey that hands down is one of the best video games